When Marcus Chen stepped off the small charter plane onto the muddy airstrip in the heart of the Amazon basin, he had no idea that his routine botanical research expedition would turn into the most terrifying experience of his life. The 34-year-old botanist from Seattle had spent years studying rare orchid species, traveling to remote locations across the globe. He considered himself an experienced outdoorsman, comfortable in wild environments. But nothing could have prepared him for what awaited him deep in the unexplored sections of the Peruvian rainforest. Marcus's journey began like any other research trip. He had received a grant to document several potentially undiscovered orchid species reported by local indigenous communities. His plan was straightforward: hire a local guide, trek 3 days into the jungle to reach a specific valley known for its unique microclimate, spend 4 days collecting samples and data, then return to civilization. The entire trip was supposed to take 10 days, with plenty of safety margins built in. His guide, a weathered man named Julio, who had lived near the jungle his entire life, seemed reliable and knowledgeable. They packed supplies carefully: enough food for 12 days, water purification tablets, camping equipment, satellite phone, first aid kit, and Marcus's research tools. Everything was accounted for. They set off on a Monday morning, the humidity already making Marcus's shirt cling to his back before they even entered the tree line. The first 3 days passed without incident. The jungle was exactly as Marcus had experienced it before: loud, alive, and overwhelming in its density. Howler monkeys announced the dawn with their distinctive calls. Colorful macaws flew overhead in pairs. The forest floor rustled constantly with unseen creatures. Julio proved to be excellent company, sharing stories about the jungle and pointing out plants with medicinal properties that his grandmother had taught him about as a child. They reached their destination on the 4th day, a hidden valley with a small, crystal-clear stream running through it. Marcus was delighted to find that the reports had been accurate. Unusual orchid varieties grew on the tree trunks and in the canopy, species he had never seen in any botanical journal. He immediately began his work, photographing specimens, taking notes, and carefully collecting samples. Julio set up camp nearby, creating a small clearing and hanging their hammocks between sturdy trees. Days 5, 6, and 7 passed in a pleasant routine. Marcus worked during the daylight hours while Julio maintained the camp, prepared meals, and occasionally helped with the more physically demanding aspects of the research. The nights were filled with the typical jungle symphony: insects, frogs, the occasional rustle of a larger animal passing through. Marcus had grown so accustomed to these sounds that they had become almost comforting, a natural white noise that helped him sleep. Marcus woke suddenly around 2 in the morning. Something had disturbed his sleep, but he couldn't immediately identify what. The jungle had gone completely silent. This was wrong. The Amazon rainforest is never truly quiet. There's always some creature making noise, always some sound in the background. But now there was nothing, an absolute pressing silence that felt unnatural and threatening. He lay in his hammock, heart pounding, straining to hear anything at all. Julio was in his own hammock about 20 feet away, presumably asleep. Marcus wanted to call out to him, but felt an inexplicable urge to remain quiet, as if making noise would be dangerous. The silence lasted for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 10 or 15 minutes. Then, gradually, the normal jungle sounds returned. Insects began chirping again, frogs resumed their calls. Marcus eventually drifted back to sleep, convincing himself it had been nothing unusual. The next morning, he mentioned the silence to Julio over breakfast. The guide's face went pale. "You heard it too?" Julio asked quietly. "The silence?" Julio shook his head. "In the jungle, when everything goes quiet like that, it means something big is near. Something that scares all the other animals. A jaguar, maybe. Or something else." He didn't elaborate on what something else might be, and Marcus didn't press him. They decided to pack up and begin their return journey that afternoon, a day earlier than planned. They had made good progress during the day, putting several miles between themselves and the research site. They set up camp in a relatively open area, with better visibility than the dense valley floor. Both men were on edge, though neither said much about it. They ate dinner quickly and barely spoke before retreating to their hammocks as darkness fell. Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay awake, listening intently to every sound. The jungle seemed normal again, with its usual nocturnal chorus. Around midnight, he was just beginning to relax when he heard it. At first it sounded like a deep, resonant humming, so low he felt it in his chest more than heard it with his ears. The sound seemed to come from all directions at once, making it impossible to pinpoint a source. It lasted for about 30 seconds, then stopped. Marcus's entire body tensed. He heard Julio moving in his hammock, clearly awake and listening too. Then the sound changed. It became a series of rhythmic thuds, like something enormous, striking the ground in a deliberate pattern. Thud, slow and measured. Between each thud, there was a strange clicking sound, almost mechanical in nature, completely unlike any animal call Marcus had ever heard in his years of fieldwork. The thuds grew slightly louder, as if whatever was making them was moving closer. Marcus's rational, scientific mind tried to find an explanation. Perhaps it was a group of peccaries digging for roots, but that didn't explain the clicking or the strange, rhythmic nature of the sounds. Maybe a tree was falling in stages, but trees don't fall with such precise timing. Then came the vocalization, if it could be called that. It started as another low hum, but rose in pitch to become something between a whale song and industrial machinery grinding. The sound had an odd quality to it, almost like multiple voices overlapping, but not quite in sync. It lasted for nearly a minute, during which Marcus realized he had been holding his breath. "I don't know," came the reply, and Marcus could hear genuine fear in the guide's voice. "I've lived by this jungle for 40 years. I've never heard anything like this." The sounds continued for over 2 hours. Sometimes there would be silence for 10 or 15 minutes, and Marcus would hope it was over. Then they would start again, seemingly from a different direction. The thuds, the clicks, that impossible vocalization. Whatever was out there seemed to be circling their camp, staying just beyond the range of their flashlights. Around 3 in the morning, the sounds finally stopped. The normal jungle noises gradually returned. Marcus and Julio didn't sleep for the rest of the night. They sat back to back in the darkness, flashlights ready, waiting for dawn. As soon as there was enough light to see, they broke camp in record time and began hiking. Neither man spoke about what they had heard. They simply walked, fast and determined, driven by a shared, unspoken urge to get out of the jungle as quickly as possible. They barely stopped for breaks, pushing themselves harder than was probably safe. The 10th night, their last night in the jungle before reaching the airstrip, was blissfully uneventful. Whatever had been near them seemed to have stayed behind. They reached civilization the next afternoon, exhausted, filthy, and profoundly shaken. In the weeks and months that followed, Marcus tried to find an explanation for what he had heard. He consulted with zoologists, played recordings of every large animal native to the Amazon, read reports from other researchers. Nothing matched. The low-frequency humming, the rhythmic thuds, the mechanical clicking, and especially that eerie, multi-toned vocalization, none of it corresponded to any known animal. Some colleagues suggested it might have been geological sounds, the shifting of earth, underground water, or seismic activity. But that didn't explain the clearly deliberate patterns or the way the sounds seemed to move. Others proposed it could have been audiopareidolia, his frightened mind interpreting random environmental sounds as something coherent and threatening. But Julio had heard it too, and their descriptions matched perfectly. Marcus never returned to that part of the jungle. He still does research in other rainforest locations, but he's never been able to shake the memory of that 9th night. Sometimes, late at night in his comfortable Seattle apartment, he wakes up thinking he hears that deep humming sound, feeling it resonate in his chest. Then he realizes it's just the distant traffic, or the building's heating system, or his own imagination. But the fear it triggers is very real. Julio, too, refuses to speak about that expedition. When Marcus tried to contact him months later to discuss what they had experienced, the guide's only response was brief. Some things in the jungle are not meant to be understood. We were lucky to leave. To this day, Marcus has no explanation for the sounds from that second to last night. He's learned to live with the mystery, though it troubles him. As a scientist, he's trained to find rational explanations, to categorize and understand. But the Amazon, he's come to accept, still holds secrets. Some of them, perhaps, are better left undiscovered. The jungle keeps its mysteries, and some sounds once heard can never be forgotten or explained.